Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another edition of True North Report, broadcasting live on Facebook, after the fact on YouTube, and anywhere that this signal is received, we will take you. Thanks very much for tuning in. My name is Andrew Lawton, a fellow with True North, and one of these people who I think I'm, as at this point, the only person left in Canada who hasn't been ejected from the Liberal caucus. It's actually a mounting number right now. I had to check. The Prime Minister hadn't called me this morning. So I think as of this point, I haven't yet been kicked out for the grave crime of disloyalty to the body politic that Justin Trudeau is basically putting out as a standard for Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott and Selena Caesar-Chavin and basically anyone else who wants to be a Liberal at this point or ever in the subsequent years that follow must pledge their undying and unrelenting loyalty to Justin Trudeau. This is where I think we've gotten to a point in Canada, and I think we passed this point a little while ago, but it bears restating now, where we need to view this as not a partisan matter anymore. And to be fair, I don't think it ever was a partisan matter. I think, like anything, the Liberals were more likely to protect the Liberal record, and Conservatives and NDPers were more likely to jump up and down on the Liberals' throats. But this is not a partisan matter when you talk about the serious issues that are at stake here regarding the rule of law, regarding political interference in prosecutions, regarding the treatment of cabinet members, regarding the treatment of the Attorney General, who is supposed to be an independent agent of the law in this country. And when you take all of these things and put them together, this is not just a left and right issue. This is something that has grave implications for all members of Parliament and indeed for all Canadians, which is why I think it was such a chilling move, even if it is an unsurprising move, that Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott were summarily turfed from their party as part of the disloyalty purge that Justin Trudeau set himself up to execute, no pun intended, less than 24 hours ago. So I'm going to be talking about this in a few different contexts here. Number one is the implication over the fake feminism that Justin Trudeau espouses. One of the elements I want to explore is that of what it means for the SNC-Lavalin scandal. And I also want to tackle the media side of this. And I don't know how long I'm gonna spend on each thing. And as is truly the case here, I usually get like 12 minutes in and then I get sidetracked on something else and we go down that road. And at the end of it, I realize that I forgot to mention, 7 of the 8 points that I wanted to. So we ram them into the end. But I do want to hear from you on this. Maggie in the chat has said hello from Alberta, Andrew. Well, hello from Ontario, Maggie. Louise has said, I have not seen one comment favoring Trudeau or the Liberals, except, of course, praying for Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott. Well, see, I'm actually envious of you, Louise, because I have seen a lot of shilling for the Liberals, and ultimately the Liberal Party has put out its members and supporters as surrogates right now to basically tell Canadians that Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott were the problem. Not that, these people were just misunderstood and there was a misunderstanding and all of that stuff, but that they, in fact, are the problem. And hi, Corey. Corey says hello as well. So let me start on that point, because I think Louise brings up an element of this discussion that's important, which is the public support for the Liberals right now, or lack thereof. And I think in one sense, there's always going to be some of that. And we see that in the media. There was a funny Toronto Star piece that wasn't meant to be funny by Susan Delacour, who, by the way, I like a great deal. I get along with Susan, even if we don't see eye to eye politically. But she had written this piece, and I can't remember the exact headline, but to paraphrase, it was Jody Wilson-Raybould rewrites the book on how to lose your job. So even that premise is based on the fact that Jody Wilson-Raybould is the one whose behavior we need to look at here and not Justin Trudeau's. And there have been some other commentators like Amanda Alvaro, who you often see on Power and Politics, who was calling this a non-scandal. And up until this morning was calling it on Twitter a non-scandal. Now, let me ask you, has a non-scandal ever resulted in the resignation of 2 cabinet ministers, 1 one Privy Council clerk, and one principal secretary to the Prime Minister. It's like we're doing the 12 days of Christmas. On the 4th day of Christmas, my true love gave to me the resignations of 2 cabinet ministers. Like, this is the insane part of this, is that for such something that the Liberals are saying is a non-scandal and a non-issue, or as Van Jones on CNN would say, a nothing burger, we've lost 4 very important people, plus Selena Caesar-Chavez, who's resigned now from the Liberal caucus, which not directly tied to SNC-Lavalin, but I think all part of the same saga, because she was very much supporting Jody Wilson-Raybould. So we've lost 5 people right now over something that Liberals are still trying to say is no big deal. And I did a radio interview in Mississauga earlier today, and if you were listening, some of these points will not be original, but I do think they're important to restate for the rest of you who didn't necessarily hear that. And the 2 points that I would stress are that Justin Trudeau has changed his story every single time he's spoken up about this. You may remember, we have to go way back 2 months to that initial Globe and Mail story saying that Jody Wilson-Raybould was pressured, and that was why she was demoted to Veterans Affairs. She was still in cabinet then. That was like 3 chapters of this thing ago. And what happened was Justin Trudeau said, no, there was no pressure. Neither the current nor former attorney, I've almost memorized it now. Neither the current nor the former Attorney General was directed by me or anyone in my office to take a decision in this. I think it was to take a decision in this way. There was a weird wording. So he said, no one was directed. And he repeated that and repeated it and repeated it and repeated it. He repeated it to media. He repeated it to the question period askers. He repeated it to all of these different people. And then the story changed, and I've forgotten the order of everything. So bear with me. But my personal favorite was that, no, she would still be in cabinet if Scott Bryson hadn't resigned. And that was the one that triggered the hashtag because Scott Bryson resigned. And then it became, no. If she had an issue, she should have spoken to me. And then it was that, well, if she had an issue, she wouldn't be in cabinet. And then she resigns from cabinet. And then it's, I'm still not clear on what this is. And the story kept changing. It kept changing to such a point that even after the committee meeting, after the Justice Committee meeting, during which Jody Wilson-Raybould spoke her truth, Trudeau was saying, see, everything's fine. Then you fast forward to the day that she releases that tape of her and Michael Wernick on the phone. And then Justin Trudeau said, I was not aware of this conversation. Now, I thought that was signaling the beginning of maybe not contrition, but I thought that was signaling the beginning of perhaps Justin Trudeau backing off the there's nothing to see here narrative. And I think that he had started to, but now he's gone full steam ahead, the we've done nothing wrong route, to such an extent that he is now vilifying Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott. He is now overseeing and executing himself a smear campaign against these people, most notably calling Jody Wilson-Raybould's behavior unconscionable for daring to record a phone call that Justin Trudeau was denying existed before hearing the recording. So I want you to listen to this in context here, not the recording. You can check that out on our page if you haven't already heard it. But Trudeau, on one hand, saying, no, this never happened. And then when confronted with the proof of it, turns and says, well, that she never should have recorded that. So he was at one point trying to say, I didn't really like that and I wasn't aware of that. And now he's saying, who cares? You shouldn't have recorded it. If it was so bad after hearing it, you'd think Trudeau would have instead pushed on that side of the discussion where, I don't necessarily agree with the tactics of recording it, but yes, Michael Wernick did overstep. Yes, Michael Wernick did put what could aptly be described as pressure on you, but he didn't do that. Instead, he victim blames, goes down the road of saying Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott are problems that must be dealt with, and then we fast forward to the Liberal caucus meeting yesterday. Trudeau informs members of the Liberal caucus that JWR and JP are out on their rear ends. Now, I've said throughout this whole thing that I have a tremendous amount of respect for Jody Wilson-Raybould's integrity, even if I have a great many disagreements with her on policy, because simply put, I think policy can exist on a separate plane than personal integrity. I look at a guy like Nathan Cullen in the NDP. I probably disagree with him on most things, but he is a man of integrity and he has a dedicated heart for public service. And I can say that about Liberals and New Democrats, and I don't know any Bloc Québécois people on a personal level, so I won't include them. But I know people in most parties that have personal integrity and character and moral fiber. And I don't know Jody Wilson-Raybould. I've never met her. I've never interviewed her. But she has integrity, and she's demonstrated it throughout this. And I can respect that without agreeing with her on things. But she has now become a whistleblower. And, you know, as much as the Liberals might want to say that this is about, in their minds, someone who's being disloyal, she was blowing the whistle on conduct that no one should be approving of or endorsing or allowing. And that's where Trudeau should be grateful for her. You see, when she said that she was holding the line against pressure, the point that she was making was, I think, a very valid one, that she felt that she was the safeguard between political interference happening and political interference not happening. She believed that she, as a woman of integrity, could do a better job blocking such efforts as Attorney General. And indeed, she wasn't even blaming Trudeau. Maybe she was blaming people around him, but she pushed back against Michael Wernick, basically saying, look, if he wants to call me, he can, but I'm not doing it, and I'm uncomfortable with the fact that you and I are even having this conversation right now. And that was so tremendously important to hear that when everyone had been saying, she's misremembering it. Maybe she has a different interpretation of events and all of this other stuff here. Donnie writes on Facebook, watching from PEI. Hello, Andrew. Great job. Well, hello, Donnie. I actually I was in PEI in October and quite enjoyed it. So thanks very much. Priscilla writes, do you think more MPs are going to follow and resign? So I had Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott not been kicked out of caucus, my answer would be no. I thought that we had reached capacity on how many people were going to resign or step down or anything like that. Now that they have, I could see some people in the caucus becoming very uncomfortable with it. Maybe not resigning, but certainly saying, I'm not going to run again. I think that's something that we will potentially see a couple of more instances of here. Because remember, both of these women were supposed to be on the Liberal Party ballot in October, and now they're not. Now some other candidates are going to be appointed. So that'll be something to watch. But you raise, or you allow me to anyway raise or segue into, Priscilla, another element of this discussion that I feel is a significant one, and that is the fact that these people, I don't quite understand how they could have been running on the Liberal ballot anyway with all that they know and all they've exposed about the Liberals. Because both of them, JWR and Philpott, have said, yeah, there is a lack of confidence they have in the PMO in its current form. And Jane Philpott was quite brazen about that. Trudeau, for his part, takes that as something to say, well, you know, if you're not confident in me as a leader, then you're gone. But what he's saying there is that no dissent is allowed, no disagreement is allowed, and more importantly, people are supposed to put their loyalty to him above their loyalty to country. They're supposed to put party above country, Trudeau above rule of law, and this is something that's supposed to be commonplace, and if not, you'll find yourself ejected from caucus the way these two women were. And that's such a shameful way to run it. And remember, Trudeau is everything he claims to hate. The big criticism that the Liberals leveled against the Harper Conservatives is that they thought that party was too top-down. So here we have Trudeau, who's actually blocking dissent on social issues, blocking dissent on all of these other things, including key areas where party should not matter as much as patriotism. And then you've also got Trudeau, and a lot of Liberals that, you know, say, oh, Trump this, Trump that. Well, look, Trump has been cleared of collusion and interference and obstruction. Trudeau is actually doing what Trump has been accused of by the left. And this was a point that Mark Stein made a few weeks ago that I think is a valid one here. Julian writes on Facebook, I think what's shocking is that the aberration of this event is not self-evident to any thinking Canadian. Well, I think that the event is, I'm going to take a step back on this one, Julian, because I think that lots of Canadians are talking about it. But at this point, it has nothing to do with SNC-Lavalin itself. I mean, SNC-Lavalin is a corrupt company. It's been found guilty of corruption in numerous courts. It's committed numerous acts of lawlessness in Canada and abroad. And at a certain point, there was a legitimate question of why would the Liberals want to go to bat for SNC-Lavalin? And I raised, as did a number of other people, the deep ties between the Liberals and SNC. But SNC is not really a relevant part of the discussion now. This is just in internal politics right now of how the Liberal Party deals with contempt of the law with its own ranks. And basically, it's easy to determine how, because the Liberal Party does not deal with contempt of the law within its own ranks. And they actually deal with the ejection of people who raise these issues. And I do genuinely believe that Canadians pay attention to this, how much that will weigh on their decisions to vote and how to vote in October. It's early to say. One thing we know about politics is that, unfortunately, people tend to have very short memories when it comes to these things. I got a message here from Marina. The indignation in the Liberal Party of Canada trying to sell to Canadians is truly laughable. Yep, very, very much agree. And let's see. This is a fun one. Steven says, shirt and tie, jacket too, maybe brush the teeth. Ooh. Dark gray wall, truly tacky video involving an important item to most Canadians. Well, so here's the thing. I've done the jacket, I've done the tie, and I've done none of these things. This is like a fireside chat. You're being invited to my inner abode, and thankfully I did brush my teeth about an hour and a half ago. So I'll give you the rest. I'll give you the wall and the tie and the jacket, but I'm not giving you the toothbrushing thing, Stephen. But thanks for playing anyway. And what else do we have here? I'm making sure I don't have like parsley in my teeth now. Thanks, there. Making me all self-conscious there. I've already forgotten your name. Thankfully, you're irrelevant. Let's see. Another person here. David writes, what have people been commenting to me for the last couple of years? I wish we had our own Trump. So I try not to make all of these things about comparisons to Donald Trump, because I feel that's one of the most overdone comparisons that exists in political discourse now. But I do think that one element where a comparison is valid, not even to Trump as a person. I think that gets into territory where people like him, don't like him. It's irrelevant to Canadian politics. But one thing that I do find to be fascinating about it is that Trump's success was because he didn't have any of these ties that we all ultimately find so objectionable in other people. I mean, with Trump, yes, there was this whole Russia collusion boogeyman thing that ended up being a genuine nothing burger, as we learned from the Mueller report. But Trump didn't have the SNC-Lavalin. Trump didn't have the ad scam. Trump didn't have all of these things that tend to be the source of scandal when it comes to other politicians. He was beholden to nobody, and that was one of the things that average, ordinary, middle Americans tended to like about him. And Trudeau is more Clinton-esque in that way, whereas Trudeau's got the family money, Trudeau's got the foundation, Trudeau's got the corporate ties, Trudeau's got the family ties, and Trudeau has all of these things that become so central to a government in scandal, which is what we have now. And again, I go back to the point that I raised at the beginning, which is how can something simultaneously be a non-issue yet cause so many political careers to be mounting in the corner? When you've got Jane Philpott, you've got Jody Wilson-Raybould, you've got Michael Warnick, you've got Gerald Butts, you've got Trudeau hanging on by a thread here. And this is not what happens when a non-story goes on for so long. And I've got to bring up legitimately a point here that I feel has been underexplored this week, and that is about the Justice Committee, where, and this is fascinating here, the Justice Committee, which had Jody Wilson-Raybould testify, then Jerry Butts, then Michael Warnick, refused to allow Jody Wilson-Raybould to come back, wouldn't allow it. And they ultimately forced her hand, which is why she produced all of these documents and all of this evidence, including the phone call this week, because they wouldn't let her testify in person again. And I think we know why. So Jody Wilson-Raybould does this, and the Justice Committee has tremendous amount of egg on its face here. And here's why. because they were the ones when they refused to allow Jody to come back. Do you remember what they said? Do you remember what Anthony Housefather, the chair of the committee, said? Do you remember what El Sasi said? They said, oh, no, that we've gotten everything. There is no more information here. We've gotten everything. They basically said we've bled this stone dry. So they thought that to allow this to continue would be to keep beating a dead horse. Well, that horse just got up and galloped away. And the Justice Committee members are probably hoping to gosh that no one looks at them and says, well wait, how do we have this phone call if you said that everything was done? Jody Wilson-Raybould said she had more, and you said no, she didn't. So again, we have the Liberals trying to impose their will on other people. You've got the Liberals trying to say to Jody Wilson-Raybould, no, you've got nothing to say. You've got Justin Trudeau saying to her, you are disloyal. You've got the one today that came up, what's her name, Melanie Joly, who goes to, says basically that, I don't have the exact transcript, but her comments were basically that feminism requires loyalty. And Trudeau was speaking to the Daughters of the Vote group this morning, and he made this absolutely asinine comment. We'll have the video up on the True North Facebook shortly, where he basically said you can't have diversity without trust. So even in the midst of scandal, when he's kicked 2 women from caucus and he's gotten rid of an Aboriginal cabinet member, he's still saying, no, diversity, yes, but you need trust for diversity, and there's no trust, so the lack of trust trumps the lack of diversity. Like, I don't even think he knows what he's saying now. But his point is that the lack of trust that they fostered, not him, that they fostered, is responsible for the lack of diversity. Therefore, cabinet and caucus don't need to be as diverse because it's their fault. So blame the women. So remember, Justin Trudeau, who was jumping up and down, chomping at the bit to go trust all women, believe women, listen to women, is now saying blame the women. Has refused to accept one iota of responsibility for anything that has happened, for anything that has unfolded in the course of this scandal. And I find this to be tremendously hypocritical. To go back to the question that I was tackling earlier in the stream here, it's not a guarantee that this will resonate with voters directly. And if I were to switch into a political advisory role here, which I'm not, I keep trying to get the politicians to listen, but unfortunately they have other ideas sometimes. But if I'm Andrew Scheer, yeah, jumping up and down, SNC is a significant thing to do. But it's not going to be the silver bullet. It's not going to be the trump card that's going to make Canadians forget about everything else. I think carbon tax, to bring an example into perspective here, the national carbon tax went into effect this week. Ontarians saw an increase in fuel costs. People in Saskatchewan did as well. And I think New Brunswick, and I've seen photos of people that people have put about what their gas prices went up to and all that across the country. But Justin Trudeau's carbon tax is something that people can quantify more than they can quantify the SNC-Lavalin, Jody Wilson-Raybould, Michael Warnick issues. I would venture a guess to say that most Canadians had never even heard of Michael Warnick before a month ago. And I think just as easily, people who maybe saw his name or heard his name on TV have probably forgotten who Michael Warnick is already or soon will. And this is, again, a point that I've raised in the past in different contexts. We always have to be aware of how average Canadians interact with news and interact with politics. And it's not the same way that the diehards, people like me, and I venture to say people like most of you do. So we have to be aware of that. Andrew Scheer's got to be aware of that, Maxime Bernier as well, and Jagmeet Singh as well. They've got to be aware that what they know from inside the Ottawa bubble is not necessarily the same as what Dougie the mechanic or Zoe the grad student is experiencing in Watford, Ontario, or in Calgary, Alberta, or on Vancouver Island in British Columbia. I mean, that's just not the way that people are engaging on this issue. So I do think that Justin Trudeau has a path to victory despite the magnitude of all of this. And one of the big things is that by delegitimizing Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott, by delegitimizing them, Justin Trudeau is trying to give himself immunity from anything they say in the future. Because this is going to, I think he knows there's more. Not necessarily more facts, but perhaps there is more in the way of stuff that they have to say about him. And by delegitimizing them, by saying, oh, you know, she acts unconscionably, and no, they weren't team players, and they lacked confidence, and they fostered a breakdown of trust and all of that. By saying all of that, Trudeau is effectively trying to, it doesn't mean he'll succeed, but he's trying to handicap any future criticisms they level towards him, of which I think there will be several. So a lot of people have asked, and I want to read a couple of more questions here. Yes, Tony points out, don't forget Liberal MP Judy Scrow said put up or shut up. Yeah, and I think one big issue that we're going to see, if you want some fun, look at Sheila Copps' Twitter, which is not normally something I would prescribe for anyone, but it's kind of amusing because Sheila Copps is basically her mentality is telling women to shut up, even called JWR a B word. I don't know if we're allowed to say the B word, but there's only one B word that really she would think applies in this case. But, you know, it is going to be fascinating because Jody Wilson-Raybould has not yet said what her political future will hold. Jane Philpott has not yet said what her political future will hold. Remember, these are both one-term MPs so far. Now, it's entirely possible that Wilson-Raybould will lead a campaign to become chief of the Assembly of First Nations. Or maybe she'll try to enter BC politics. Maybe Jane Philpott will try to seek the leadership of the Ontario Liberal Party. I mean, they have options, but they are not going to be Liberal candidates come 2015 or 2019. If Justin Trudeau is unsuccessful in the election, which is not a guarantee, and I don't like when people say it's a guarantee, but if he's not a successful person in this election, then what's going to happen is the knives will be out for him. But we've also seen how much the caucus has united behind him right now in a way that makes it very difficult to think that they would roll out the red carpet for Jody Wilson-Raybould or Jane Philpott if either one of them wanted to take the reins of the Liberal Party in a few months. And this is all a big if. This is if Trudeau loses and is ousted as leader, which is a big if because, quite frankly, I haven't seen the Conservatives being really electrifying yet, or at least not as much as they need to be. So there's going to be, I think, a significant dilemma in the way that Canada is going to go forward on this issue. And it does need to remain alive. It does need to remain alive. It does need to remain a significant challenge and a significant discussion. But Trudeau has tried to turn the page on this yet again. So ultimately, what it is incumbent on Canadians to do and on the Conservatives to do is to not let him move on from something that is so significant. And the voices of Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott are significant ones. They are not conservatives, and we shouldn't be lauding them or exalting them as conservatives or prospective conservatives, but we can still laud their integrity so long as we're consistent across the board with it. That's all for me for now. I do want to thank you very much for tuning in. Just as a bit of a programming note, we will be in court on April 15th to the 18th. And this is for the carbon tax trial in Ontario. We did a crowdfunding campaign, and within less than a week, we were able to meet and exceed our goal. So I'm going to be covering that from Toronto in just about a week and a half. So thank you to all who chipped in there. If you do want to help us out by helping us keep the lights on, we're not getting a piece of that $600 million bailout, head on over to True North Canada. You can get there by going to truenorthinitiative.com or tnc.news. And join the Andrew Lawton Heritage Club or Patriot Club. Small monthly contribution goes a long way to helping us do the work that you've come to support. So thank you so much to everyone. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you. God bless. Good day, Canada.